came in late, my name's Jeff, and we're just glad you're here tonight. For about the next 15 minutes, if you will let me, and I'm going to do it whether you let me or not, I want to tell you a story. So we're here to celebrate Christmas, the birth of our Savior, celebrate a couple from Nazareth, a young couple, betrothed to be married, not yet married, Mary and Joseph. And they went down to Bethlehem, and there Mary gave birth to Jesus. The Savior of the world was born just like us. But I want to tell another story of another couple from Bethlehem tonight. An earlier couple, it's back in the Old Testament. If you want to read it later, it's in the book of Ruth. It's just 4 chapters long, but it's an amazing book. I always remember where it is. There may not be another Lyle Lovett fan in this place. Hopefully. Okay. But Lyle Lovett wrote a song which helps me remember where these 3 books are in the Bible. He wrote a song called Joshua Judges Ruth. And that's where you find Ruth in the Bible, after Joshua and after Judges. But it tells this story about another couple from Bethlehem, a gal, her name was Naomi. She was married to a husband, had 2 sons. And in Bethlehem at that time, there arose a famine. Okay, so food was hard to come by. They heard that in another country called Moab, there was food to be had. So they went down to Moab, to a foreign country, to feed their family. Okay, her husband said, let's go. Now, once they get to Moab, for Naomi, it was tragedy upon tragedy. She gets there, her husband dies. She, sometime in there, finds wives for her 2 boys from the Moabites. Now, normally they would have married within their nation, but they were in this foreign country. Finds wives for her boys, and then her 2 boys die while they're in that country. So here is now a widow, Naomi, and she has 2 daughter-in-laws to take care of. A pretty tall order. And then she hears that back in the home country, things have gotten better. Back in Bethlehem, she remembers her husband had a relative who, if they go back, they should be able to find food in his field. And so she says, let's go back to my home country. And the daughters-in-law, at first, are like, yes, we'll go with you. But then Naomi stops them and she says, here's the thing. I release you if you want, because my sons are dead, my husband is dead. If you want, you can stay with your people. She tells them, she says, you can be released from any obligation to me. Some crying goes on, things like that. And one of the daughter-in-laws, her name is Orpah. Orpah says, I'm going to stay with my people. But this other daughter-in-law named Ruth says this amazing thing. It's just an amazing thing. She says, no, I'm going with you. Okay? Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. So Naomi and Ruth, they go back to Bethlehem. They go home for Naomi. Ruth now goes to a foreign country. And they get there, they begin to settle in. People welcome them, they're back. It's good to have them back in the family. And Naomi takes Ruth and she said, now go to this field, because in those days, the farmer of the field would have left the edges for the poor to come and pick up what's left, so everyone got fed. Okay, now today most of us aren't farmers, so we might help places like the food kitchen and do things like that, the same principle. She said, go out to this field, it's family of your father-in-law who's now deceased, and you glean there with the other women. So she does that. She goes out to this field. She says she begins to pick up what's left around the edges. Now pretty soon, the owner of that field, Boaz, he shows up and he begins to ask about her. And he finds out who she is, and he has favor upon her. He invites her to come sit close at the fire. He warns all his young men to stay away from her. That's what a good guy does. He says, don't touch her, don't go near her, don't do anything to her. Tells her, glean with my other women, you'll be safe. But he also brings her in. He says, come sit with me by the fire and actually eat some of the good stuff. Some roasted grain. She does that, she's full, she takes home grain to her mother-in-law. And her mother-in-law realizes the favor of God is upon her. It's an amazing story. There's so much there. And so she says, now do this. Because we've had favor, go again to the fields. And she does that. And she says, and in the evening, when the men have dinner and they drink a little, when Boaz goes to sleep in his tent, you go into his tent, uncover his feet, and lay at his feet. Now to us, that seems very strange, but in that time it wasn't. And in those parts of the world, they still happen. So she does what her mother-in-law asked her to do. Boaz is eating, drinking, and being merry. He goes to bed. It says it's about midnight. She goes in and covers his feet, and she lays at his feet. And she's basically saying to him, when he wakes up, that she wants to belong to him. She'll be his. Now, Boaz is an amazing guy. And her mother-in-law tells her, she says, this is what you say to him when he wakes up and finds you there. I'm sure Boaz was startled because Boaz was past the normal marrying age and still single. He was an older guy at the time. I would imagine he's a little startled when he kind of wakes up in the middle of the night and there's a pretty young woman at his feet. Dilemma. What do I do? But Ruth has been instructed by her mother-in-law. She said, I want to read it because it's one of the most beautiful lines in the Bible, which is hard to say because it's all beautiful. But this is an amazing line that Ruth now says to Boaz. She says, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Now that word there for spread your wings can also mean just spread your garment over me. A garment of protection, a garment of welcome, a garment of bringing in, for you are a redeemer.